Tonight on Addiction Talk.
Beth McDonough was a tenacious TV crime reporter at the peak of her career, but multiple heartbreaks led her to a dangerous spiral into alcohol addiction. After 2 DUIs, she hit rock bottom, losing her dream job and her reputation. Given a choice by her former boss, go home or go to treatment, she chose treatment. Now 16 years sober, Beth shares how she found purpose through her darkest days and the courage to rise again.
Addiction Talk starts now. Beth, thank you so much for joining us on Addiction Talk. We are really honored to be able to hear your story, but also to share the golden nuggets from your personal journey. And me and Mike are here to just kind of walk through and learn more about you and where you are today. But we always like to start out with an icebreaker. And so the icebreaker question we're going to start out with is, what is one word that you would use to describe your recovery journey?
Boy, that's a biggie that you're starting out with. Excruciating. You want me to expound upon that?
Exactly. I mean, that is a word that I have not heard before, but that just like is a gut punch when you hear that.
This entire experience has been a gut punch, and that's probably the point, right? Actions have consequences, and it's supposed to hurt, and it has to hurt bad enough to get somebody's attention, and that's what I needed as well, because I had 2 DUIs. I had one, and then a year later I got a second one, and the repercussions from the first weren't quite painful enough, apparently. So I went back and did it again, and felt it the second time after I dropped an atomic bomb into my life.
Well, so I was going to say that you describe it as an atomic bomb. Could you explain what you meant by atomic bomb, like this atomic bomb in your life?
Absolutely. I was a well-known crime reporter in the Twin Cities at the time, but I've worked all over the United States for various networks at one time or another, or affiliates, large market affiliates as well. And so I kind of was pretty close to the top of my game, I would say. But I also knew that as I interviewed all of these other people and families and shared their stories and their struggles, I internally knew that I was having one. But I kept it to myself and tried to suppress it and deny, and hold on as long as you can, because every day I needed to perform at a certain level. And the atomic bomb came. I'll share a story with you that I haven't shared with anyone. It's in the book. And you would think this would have gotten my attention, but it didn't. Back in the day, I was covering a huge trial in Fargo, North Dakota of Alfonso Rodriguez. People might remember his name because he had kidnapped a woman named Drew Shadeen from a mall. And he took her across state lines and assaulted her and killed her. And her family really wanted justice, and so they had the case moved to a federal courthouse in North Dakota where there is the death penalty, because they wanted the death penalty for this. And I'm covering the trial. It's a huge trial, a lot at stake here, not just justice for this family, but predator laws were on the line, sexual offender reform laws and predatory offender laws. All of this was in play in this trial, and he was a previous convict for a sex offense, but he had been let out after serving his time. Anyway, so I'm covering this trial for a few weeks, and we get word the jury's coming down with a verdict. The verdict is going to be announced the next day. Everybody's there, all the networks, all local media from 3 states. And what do we tend to do after work, after the 11 o'clock news? You go out and you blow off some steam. So that's what I did. We went to the hotel bar. We're staying hours away. Go to the hotel bar. And what's interesting is I remember everybody else leaving, but I didn't leave. And that I don't remember really what happened after that until I woke up in the hospital. And it turns out at some point, all my colleagues left, but I stayed and kept drinking like we alcoholics do it. And somehow I got outside in the parking lot and I fell. And you know those concrete curbs that you pull your car up to park to? Landed face first on it. Broke all of the teeth, all of my teeth. And I was contracted to do live shots the entire next day for CNN, for Fox News, for my station, and all of the Foxes across the country, because the verdict is coming down. So in the, and so in the middle of the night, I call my crew. They take me to the hospital. A nurse there calls a local dentist. A local dentist comes in the middle of the night. I tell him what my emergency is. And he's like, I can give you some temporary teeth so you can go on air tomorrow. But then you're going to have to go back wherever you live, and go see a dentist and a surgeon and get your teeth put back in. Nobody knows that. And so how on earth in the middle of the night, this dentist, rebuilt my smile. And the next morning at 8 a.m. was my first live shot with CNN. And when I look at myself in that live shot now, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just looked, it was a hard night. And you would think that would shock me into stopping drinking, but it didn't. And I powered through that whole day with hundreds of live shots. And, on the drive home, and I thought, oh my gosh, nobody out there knows. In the middle of the night, I was getting my teeth repaired because of drunken stupidity. Wouldn't that be enough to sober somebody up? But it wasn't. And I kept going. So kind of my moment of reckoning was, I love my job more than anything. And my boss, after I got my second DUI, and I loved him and I had such respect for him, and we had a great working relationship. And to have someone that you respect and care for so much fire you to your face. And this really stung because he had renewed me on a contract for a long time. And he said, you are no longer of service to us. And that just was a shot to my heart. And that's what got my attention, not bashing out my teeth on a curb. But finally, someone spoke to me in a tone that resonated, and that's what got my attention.
Wow. So there's a funny story I say to people, and it's which relates to you. When you're in the drunk tank, someone says to me, how do you know if the person's an alcoholic? I mean, I'm 19 and a half years sober. I'm like, it's a really simple thing. You go over two people, you go over to the first person, you're like, will you drink and drive again? I'm like, absolutely not. You go to the second person, will you drink and drive again? They're like, I won't take the freeway next time. In other words, it's not me, it was the road I took. So here's a question I have for you. I broke my ankle years ago doing massive amounts of cocaine, drinking, and the next day I had to show up to shoot a VH1 pilot with Scott Weiland. I was business partners with him. I owned the club with him. Do you feel I literally went to meetings. I intervened in myself. I had a really high bottom. No one ever stopped me. I had people giving me cocaine. VH1 wanted me drunk. I pulled the pilot. No one slowed me down. I was dealing with the biggest rock stars in the world. I talk about it in my book. Do you feel because, and it's very rare, it's like a really good athlete like I was. I could perform. I could go and get wrecked all night. And the next day you would never know. I was shooting shows. I was showing up. Because you could perform at that level and hide it, that you didn't think you had a problem. Because I never thought I had a problem. I was around people. That's what we did in New York. I lived in New York. It was work hard, play hard. Do you know what I'm saying? Until your boss gave you the service of intervening and saying no. But you can obviously perform. You got your teeth fixed up. Normal people are like, I'm not going in. Do you see what I mean? Because that's confusing. It's cunning, baffling, and powerful. So do you think that's why you held it together like that?
I think so. And as journalists, and especially covering my beat, if you will, you see the worst of the worst of the worst. And you get a backbone. You become very strong, and you're pretty independent and autonomous in the field. It's kind of you and your crew against, your circumstances of the story that day. So you develop this strength. And my coworkers would certainly say this, gosh, you're the strongest person I know. And I think that feeds into your brain of, you're right. Most people wouldn't have gone on TV the next day, but I'm like, no, this is what we do. We get up, we keep going. I keep going. I can't let anyone know what happened. They would never suspect something like this happened by looking at me. And, I had an agent at the time, and he saw several of my live shots, and he called me and he goes, well, I got to tell you, I've never seen you smoother. You nailed it, but you look like shit. And he had no idea what I went through, just 5 hours before. And, but you kind of mentally go into overdrive, and you got to keep the train going. And I didn't have a backup plan. There's not another job waiting in the wings or something else. You keep the train going. I think, and you're like, I can't let anyone get a little peek behind the curtain. I got to keep that curtain closed and keep going and hard charging. And you're right. You run hard, you play hard. And what do journalists tend to do after their shifts are over, especially on a big occasion like that? You go out and you blow off some steam, or, you try to do that in an effort to maybe not take it home to your families. Yeah. So I can relate.
Something interesting that you said though, Beth, you had to call the crew. So I'm wondering, with you having to call the crew, did nobody raise an alarm? I know you said you did a good job of hiding it. And of course you said, your agent was like, oh, that was fabulous, but you didn't look great. Did anyone on the crew that saw you go through that, did anybody stop you or say anything at that time?
When I drink like that, I tend to be a blackout drunk. So they may have not, I don't have a memory of the entire night. I do remember saying goodbye to one of my crew. But did they try to stop me? I don't think they knew I was going to stay there. I think they thought I was going back to my hotel room as well. Over time, when you work that closely with people too, we're in a vehicle together 8 to 10 hours every day and traveling, you pick up on things. And I would say in hindsight, they suspected some close colleagues, but they also didn't want to rat me out, for lack of a better word. People have issues, and we all have different issues, especially in a newsroom. None of us are different or immune from issues. And alcoholism, as we know, is an equal opportunity disease. And I think people didn't want to rat me out. And, they thought, Beth will get a hold of this. She'll get on top of it. We didn't talk about it on the drive home. Not at all. I think everyone wanted to look past it. I wanted to act like it never happened. I mean, hey, look, I have my teeth back, right? And I right then I should have gone to treatment, but alas, I didn't.
I have a question, Beth. You never drank on the job, right?
I didn't. No, I was so in love with my job. Like, that was everything to me, but outside of it and on weekends.
See, isn't that tricky when you see like performance, right? Like I could go,
Yes.
I grew up in Australia. I was, 14, 15, drinking in pubs with guys 18, 19. I was a great athlete. That's what you did. You just drank.
Yeah.
Australia was in the middle of nowhere, Perth. You played sports. You drank every night. You hardened it up. And I was such a controlled addict that at 10 at night, I would start drinking and do cocaine when I was in a club, whatever. But at 5 a.m, I'd shut it down, never went to after hours, walk my dog. Who would suspect? Because I was so disciplined as an addict, which is so scary. So it's like, that's why probably no one ever saw it either, because when you're not drinking on the job and you can perform at a professional level and always show up, who's going to call you out? They can't, because on the job. So the gift is getting the DUIs, because that was your intervention. Because if you didn't get them, you would have probably got liver cancer like me. I would have, like, something would have happened. Like your body would have blown up. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Something disastrous would have happened, or people would have been hurt. And so I say to you, same, because I used to wake up in the mornings, 5 or 6 o'clock in the mornings, without an alarm, and go running for 5 or 6 miles. That was my thing every day. Get up, go running, hard charging. The bosses used to say to me, what are you doing emailing us at 7 and 8 in the morning? And I'm like, here's my story idea. Here's this. I'm going to break this. I know about this, because I'd start working the phones. And they were like, you don't even come in till like 1 or 2 in the afternoon, because I would work the night shift. Yeah, so I hit it hard. Excuse me. So, from outsiders looking in, maybe there wasn't anything to question. This was just right. But, if you pull back the curtain, there was a lot to question.
Yeah.
So, Beth, let me ask you this. On the outside, most people think you have it together. What was going on in the inside? Was it the stress? Was it the pressure? Like, how did this all start for you?
Thank you for asking the question. It was around 2005. I wasn't a big drinker up until then, believe it or not. But around 2005, a number of things happened in my life, which are not an excuse, just an explanation of kind of setting the tone. My mother, who I was very close with, died unexpectedly. A relationship ended right on the spot. My father had a quadruple bypass. My mother was gone. So I had to go back and take care of all of that where he lived. And there were just a number of factors in my life that I really couldn't grieve and deal with at the time because, I was project manager of getting my father healthy, taking care of my mom's estate, doing this, doing that, getting all the family in. So I really didn't have time to grieve. And when I finally got back to Minnesota and reality set in and I lived by myself, the relationship had ended. And then, it was just up to me. At that time, I thought, okay, I can handle this. But as anyone knows with grief, it hits you out of the blue. And slowly, gradually, as these things do, I started to notice I was drinking more. And people used to say if I had a glass of wine, I went to 0 to 100. They're like, how on earth? Like, we had the same thing you did. And, we're not driving into mailboxes. But I had such a low tolerance. And that's when I kind of noticed my drinking had increased. And when you're alone at night or on the weekends, that was my friend. That's what kept me company. That made time fly for me. It made me not feel the pain that I just dealt with, all of that. And it became a companion.
I mean, in recovery, we always say connection and community, and you're a high achiever. So obviously that was something that was in your childhood. It sounds like you were, you had to not people please, but you had to carry everyone and always be like, Beth's got it, Beth's got it, Beth's got it. Do you know what I mean? A lot of addicts can do that. And then because you don't have that real connection to sit with someone and unravel and say, hey, I got some stress here. You have to hold it together for everyone else. Where inside you're like going, I need help here. So in your sobriety, right, when you realize that and you have the vulnerability to reach out, how hard was that for you to be vulnerable and surrender that you've got to really look at this because you can't, you're one person, you can't carry all this weight.
Boy, it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. The hardest. As a journalist, we tend to not want to ask for help or reach out to others and kind of deal with things on our own. And people come to us to problem solve as reporters. So I was used to problem solving for everybody else every day. Even now I get calls, from people who need some help or insight on various things. So I would spend my days and my evenings problem solving for other people and not addressing my own. Gave me a good reason to kind of ignore and look past that. And then when I got fired, and the boss said my car had been taken away, my driver's license had been taken away after my second DUI. And the boss said to me, as soon as we got done signing the paperwork and, he's essentially telling me they didn't need me anymore. He said, there's a taxi cab waiting for you out there to either take you to home or to treatment. You decide. So yeah, they were, and he had offered me help the year previous. He said, Beth, after my first DUI, and there was a little blurb in the paper, maybe a little mention, but nobody really addressed it because journalists, we all know what we do after work and all of that. So nobody really touched it too much. And he offered me help. He said, if you have a problem, I can help you. Fox News will help you. And, my shame is a powerful thing. Shame held me back and no one wants to grow up to be an alcoholic or be labeled as one. And I just couldn't bring myself at that time. So clearly I wasn't ready at that time to own up to it. The second one, I knew this is, Beth, you got a problem. I mean, this is, you can acknowledge something and you can either deal with it or run from it. And I'm the type that will run to it and deal with it. And I knew then, Beth, you got a problem. And so I did go to treatment, and I went to 30 days at Hazelton Betty Ford. Then I did, aftercare. I took on a sober roommate. Fortunately, there was a meeting at a church down the street from where I lived, because it was the dead of winter in Minnesota. Didn't have a car. I had my 2 feet and a bicycle. And that church was 1 mile from my home. And so the first time I was scared to walk into that first AA meeting. And I remember hearing people saying that, thinking, why are they scared? I've run towards fires. Why are they scared? Well, when you walk into a meeting, you are scared because you're about to own up to all your stuff and put it all out there. And that meeting saved my life. I went to it every single day at noon. It's called Main Streeters. And the people in that room it felt like going home, honestly. They were welcoming. They, when I walked in, they knew me. They knew what happened. And they said, get up there and get uncomfortable. Tell us your story. So they had me working for it right off the bat. They weren't going to give me a break at all. And through AA, and then I did an aftercare program as well for 6 months. The sober roommate was so helpful just to have that companionship and support and someone who understands what you're going through. And those were key elements for helping me to realize you've got a problem, you got to deal with it. Because even when you're in treatment, and I was in a women's unit, and you hear women talking about doing 2 750 milliliters of, or whatever that is, of vodka, the big ones. And I was like, oh my God, maybe I'm not. Well, no, then when you hear me, I drink a bottle, but it's like I've had 5, because alcohol has that effect on me. So I knew I had a problem, and it was time to pony up. I was either going to pony up or there was not much of a life ahead for me.
I have 2 questions there that kind of come to mind. In that moment, you walk out from the news director and you're like standing there like, I have 2 choices. Did you know immediately, or did you wrestle with yourself to decide?
I knew immediately. Yeah, I knew immediately. I knew this was my wake-up call, if you will. And I know everyone's rock bottom is different. I kind of say to myself in my story that I feel like I hit grave dirt. And something else, as I was walking out the door, one of my colleagues at Fox News at the time, and he says, hey, Beth. And I mean, no one wanted to look at me. Their eyes were turning away. They were ducking away from me in this cavernous newsroom. And he says, Beth, a guy I really respected. And I said, yeah. And he goes, woman up. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, I have to woman up. You know what? This is adulting, Beth. Grab the bull by the horns, and it's time to go to work. It's time to get busy and, and research your history. And it turns out alcoholism runs in my family. I learned this when I was in treatment, and you kind of retrace it all. And I reached out to family members. My parents had passed, so I couldn't ask them too much. But it turns out both my grandparents on my mother's side had died of alcoholism. My sister was a serious drug addict from such a young age. She died from a drug overdose. And so it runs in the family. And when you kind of look at that too, and I'm a factual person, and I'm like, okay, it runs in the family. I have a propensity to drink. I cannot handle it. You know what? Those days are over. Welcome to the life of abstinence, or else.
Yeah.
And my second, go ahead, Mike.
You go to the second question, go.
Yeah. So the second question I was wondering is, did it become public right away? Like, what happened at that point? Because I know you were the person who covered the news, and then you have this moment. They're like, hey, you have to go to treatment, but they had to explain somehow that you were no longer on the air.
Yes. It was public immediately. It was probably public 5 minutes after I was booked into jail. And, I might laugh about this now because I have to have a little levity looking back at it because it's so traumatic. And so I will go to the second time of my DUI. So when the deputy was taking me out and releasing me, but my attorney wouldn't bail me out for the weekend. So he made me stay in there till a Monday. for a good hard lesson. And then he parked his vehicle about 10 blocks away from the jail. So I had to do the walk of shame because all the media was there. Inside Edition was there. And so he did that on purpose as a lesson because he picked me up after my first DUI as well. So he parked really far away, and it was in Minnesota winter. And so I had to scurry past and do the walk of shame. But the deputy, she was taking me out. We get in the elevator, and she said, you know, I walked you out your first time too. I have no memory of that. I have no memory of either accident that I had either, but I had no memory of that. And then when I had to go to the workhouse, which is kind of like a jail, but it was in addition to jail. Let me say that because I had a weekend in jail, 2 weekends in jail. And in addition to that, and when I went to the workhouse, people were like, you look really familiar. Your voice sounds familiar. And I was horrified, you know, just thinking, I do not want to talk about this for the next 3 days in here. And there was no escaping it. It was immediate. And my boss had called immediately when I got out of jail. So somebody tipped him off, you know, and let's be honest, that's how I made my living too. People tip me off all the time. And if I'd been tipped off about someone, this is the same thing I would have done. I would have gone to cover it. And there was a woman also in a holding cell who was having a very bad night, much like myself. What do you talk about when you're in jail? What'd you do? How'd you get here? Is it your first one? You know, did you hurt anyone? Da, da, da. And she was as upset as I was. And she said, well, I'm probably going to lose my job. And I said, is it your first one? She goes, no, it's my second one. And I'm like, ooh, you're right. It's my second one too. I'm going to be fired for sure. And I didn't want to tell her what I did though, because then I said, well, what do you do? Will maybe your company work with you? And she goes, no, I work for MAD. You know, yeah, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. Any other time I would have done a story on that, right? But here I am sitting with one of the executives at MAD. She's on her second DUI. I'm on my second DUI. I mean, imagine that conversation for the rest of the weekend. Right?
I'm sorry. This is like, that's a movie.
Yes. The stories are everywhere. Beth, you have a problem. There's no ignoring this anymore. You know, get your act together and clean it up and get sober. But
So
it was immediate. Go ahead.
I know this question, I got it. So you didn't start drinking until 2005 and it was genetic, like mine's genetic. Did you suffer any trauma as a kid?
Wow. Boy, I just learned fairly recently that apparently I did. I don't remember it.
It was buried.
I had a wonderful childhood. Let me say that. My mom and my stepdad were wonderful parents and begged me not to drink for most of my life. And as a kid does, I didn't ask why at that time. And of course, now I know about the grandparents and my sister and some other things. Yes, I was in an IHOP with some relatives a couple of years ago in Arizona. And it was an aunt and an uncle. And they, after my parents passed, they kind of became my pseudo parents. And my uncle said, have you ever talked to your dad? And I'm like, my dad, my stepfather was my dad. He raised me since I was maybe 8 years old. And he was wonderful. And I said, no, you mean the biological dad, the sperm donor? And he said, yeah. And I go, no, he abandoned us when I was 2. And he goes, well, you know why, right? And I said, doesn't matter. He abandoned the family and left my mom to raise 3 kids. I don't care the why. And he said, well, because your father wanted a son. And I said, okay. And he goes, you were born. And I'm like, oh, wow. Well, okay. That didn't bother me too much. And he goes, he used to beat you. And my jaw dropped. I've never heard this before. And I said, what? And he goes, that's why he left in the middle of the night. He said, you guys were visiting us and I could hear something in the dining room. And so my uncle got up, big guy, 6'5" guy, got up and went into his dining room and he saw my biological father throwing me up against the wall because he wanted a son. And so my uncle said he broke it up. And he goes, it wasn't the first time that you were abused. It was just the latest time, Beth. And he goes, your mother never told you? And I said, here I am in my 50s. She went to her grave with that. And he goes, aren't you lucky And I thought, yeah, maybe in a strange way, because if you grow up with that in your head that you weren't the one wanted and that your father abused you, and then he left because of you, because you were a girl and not a boy. My mother never told me that. It's the first time I ever heard it. And he says, you don't even know that like you were in and out of the hospital your first year of life? And I said, no, no. So the long answer to that is yes. And I just found that out recently.
That's crazy because I mean, all addicts have been traumatized, and it's called the implicit and explicit part of the brain. Explicit memory, you remember like that. Implicit is buried. There's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score. When you're working with trauma that's buried in the body remembers the trauma and holds on to it. Under stress, that's why addiction is part, environment and part genetic. So you don't know when you're under the stress of people pleasing to save the job, to save this. Through the sensory, that person that abuses you, whatever your implicit part of the brain holds on to that. The smells, the taste, you could get around someone and go, what is it? Because you're reliving the trauma. And if you don't have a safe ground and you don't know it's buried, what do? You alter the mood through something external because you don't have someone, right, to help you regulate. So over the years, you get so good at burying it, right? And it stays in the body because the body keeps the score, and you're always triggered. You're like, what is it about that person? Because the memory shuts off to protect us, right? But the amygdala holds on to the memory, right? Because it has to hold on to it for the next situation that comes. That's why the amygdala is fight, flight, freeze, feed, and feed or fawn, right? So it's all buried. And that's why when I work with addicts, the big thing I do is stretch out the trauma because we're all traumatized. That's why I asked you that. I was like, there's got to be trauma there, even though it's genetic. You know what I mean? So then work, right? You're under stress, right? That's the genetic, it's the environment and the stress, right? So you're like, what are you going to do? Alter my mood. Why? Because I can't just talk about my stress to people. I can't talk to people that I'm going to carry everyone and I'm going to be, you become the martyr. You know
yes.
what I mean? Right? And then that cycle keeps going until we intervene.
Yes. And I worked in Philadelphia for a number of 7 years, and I worked for CBS and NBC there. And 9/11 happened while I was there. And of course, we're an hour and a half away. And so I was sent out to help cover the aftermath of 9/11. And I was on air actually when the first plane hit. And so, here in your Beth breakdown, you guys going to New York, we'll tell you when you're coming home. You have a go bag, and there you go until further notice. And so I've had people begging me to help find their loved ones. So, I have that trauma, and then trauma of covering stories of little girls being kidnapped from their home and found mutilated in rivers. And I had dinner with a friend of mine who's a teacher in Minnesota. And we went to dinner one night, and she telling me about her day at school. And she was like, how was yours? And I said, oh, I just covered this killing of 9-year-old Barway Collins. His father murdered him for a life insurance policy. And her face dropped. And she's like, how are you okay with this? And I said, for me to survive, it's a light switch. I have to shut it off at the end of my day. I can tell their stories, but I'm going to keep my little hidden truth, right?
You nailed it. Yeah.
Well, Beth, when I think about all that and to see where you are today, the fact that one, you made the courageous decision to say, I'm going to go to treatment, not only going to go to treatment, I'm going to have a sober roommate. Not only am I going to go to have a sober roommate, I'm going to go to AA. I'm going to take back my life. And I think you're a testimony that you rebuilt. Like you literally rebuilt. What was that? And ended up back on air. I mean, after all that, that is enough to take some people out to say, you know what, how do I've been publicly embarrassed. I've gone through a lot. This is just enough, but you came back. How did you get the courage and the ability to say, I'm not going to let this stop me. I'm going to fight my way back up to the top?
I think it begins with, I'm not a very good quitter, which is not a good attribute to have when you're an alcoholic. And case in point, I was running a marathon one time, the Houston Marathon, at mile 19, I blew out my back, and I still finished that darn thing, and then I had back surgery. I'm not a good quitter, whether it's at work. People used to say she's tenacious, persistent. All of those things are wonderful professional attributes in my industry, your industry. Personally, I don't know. Yeah. So I'm not a good quitter. And I knew that was going to be a hurdle for me to overcome. But also, the devastation was so widespread. I was broke, homeless, had no living, had lost, I'd say, most of my friends and people in my life. And, some relatives, they were as supportive as they could be, but they're a phone call away in states across the country. So it's, I got myself into this. I'm going to have to get myself out of this. And so after dealing with all of the court requirements and then taking care of all the treatment and all of that, honestly, I was sitting down looking at my bank account like, I've got 2 months. I've got 2 months of stuff because the man I had hit sued me. So I bought him a new car. The penalties are twice as bad in Minnesota if you get 2 DUIs in 10 years. So I really had 2 months left. And I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Well, I love dogs and I have dogs and I've always rescued dogs. And I thought, I can't drive anywhere. Don't have a car. It's the dead of winter in Minnesota. I'm going to go knock on my neighbors' doors. They all know me. Can I walk your dogs and pick up their dog poop?
Wow.
And that's what I did. I walked out my door and I started knocking on the doors. And then I put together little flyers and I walked all my friends and neighbors' dogs in the neighborhood for $20 a whack to put food on my table, honestly. And I slowly built that up. And then my neighbors were like, hey, can you dog daycare our dogs? Let them come play with your dogs all day and da-da-da. Well, I was losing my home in 2 months. Going to be out, evicted, boom. And I'm like, well, I can't do it here. And so I needed a place to maybe entertain opening up a doggy daycare with no money. Well, one of the people that I was walking dogs for and picking up her dog poop, she had 2 dogs, big ones too. So you can imagine, the mess I picked up every day. She said, I know what you're going through. I've got this little warehouse. It's, a POS, if you will. You got to redo it all. But if you want to get in there and take everything out and scrape the walls and paint them and get some electricity and some water in that building, you can have it there for doggy daycare at a reduced rate. And, I didn't have dog pens or anything. I had to build all of that because I didn't have money to hire anyone. And I'm like, how do I build dog pens? YouTube. And that's, so I buckled down. I had a couple of friends that would come by and help me kind of paint the inside of this. And so I turned it into a doggy daycare. And I went to a dog park and met some people there that I could hire at a reasonable rate to come help me out. And so I slowly built this doggy daycare, then into doggy grooming, then into doggy boarding. And it became a business within 3 years, really good business. And people started calling me, hey, would you ever entertain selling your business? And, at first I was no. And then after I kept 40 dogs one night, I was like, maybe I will sell. That's a lot of barking. And it's a lot of work. And I built everything, I did the website, I did it all. And so I entertained it and I was going to sell to another business, to be honest with you. And one of my employees came to me and she said, I'd really love to take over the business and buy it from you and da-da-da. And she did such a great job. And so I said, sure, let's get this done. On the day that I closed selling the business and giving her the keys, I got a call totally out of the blue from KSTP in Minneapolis. And I'd worked at Fox in Minneapolis, but KSTP called me out of the blue. And this is the same station. I want to point out that 3 years earlier, after my second DUI, when I was begging people to give me a job, I couldn't get hired at the grocery store and I tried. KSTP said, we do not have a place for you. You are not someone that we would hire. And I'm like, wow, ow. Okay, I probably needed that at that time, right? It was very raw. And right after, same station called me and said, we've seen your progress. We've been following you and we have a job. We'd like to offer you a job. It's not on air. It's behind the scenes as an investigative producer. Would you be interested? And I'm like, when you do the work, the rewards come. And so I took that job and I am so grateful to them because KSTP does have a long history of hiring people in recovery. They're very big believers and supporters of it. And they said, we're going to require you to go to a meeting once a week, get your card signed, show it to us. And if you slip or if you have a relapse, that will be it. And so I knew that going in. The expectations were very clear. And I was so incredibly grateful that I wanted to prove myself to them and do everything I could to, make them shine as well. And so I picked up dog poop for 3 years.
So great. I know Joy is going to want to jump into the book, but I want to ask one question before that, because I know Joy. See, this is why we're great. Like, I go into the addict thing and she gets it back on track. Like, I go into the trauma thing, like, because it's just, I'm the addict. You know what I mean? So we have this.
Perfect.
I love her because I know she's going to go, she's in her brain. She's like, I got to talk about the book. And I know that. I can read her. I have a question. And this is what people don't get in sobriety, right? So when you get sober, we have all these plans, right? I've got to get the job. I've got to do this. So you take the humility. I always say attitude and humility, right?
Yes.
And it's attraction over promotion. Now, the irony is that station says we'll never hire you. And let's be honest, you picked up crap. That's the lowest form, right? But here's the thing I always ask people in this, and I always call it substitution with addicts. Like, I ran 30 half marathons in 30 days after stomach surgery. I'm a true crackhead. I used to smoke crack, do cocaine. I tell people I've got no switch, right? I know how to get it done. And Joy and I were talking about this before. Like, I've got that switch. Do you believe, because that's your superpower? Like I tell people, Robert Downey Jr. went from crackhead to Iron Man.
Yes.
Let's be serious, right? That is your superpower if you channel it. That's not going anywhere. You and I are addicts and alcoholics. We are born with that dis-ease. But if we can figure out that dis-ease and ease ourselves, it's magical, right?
Yes.
Do you believe that as well? It's a substitution. As long as you can the energy is not going anywhere. We're born with this. And we have to know how to shape it. Do you believe that as well?
Absolutely. And you have to you hear the word substitutions. I kind of call it redirection for me. And I used to drink late at night after the news. And in order to occupy myself, I would start cooking late at night, make meal prep like people do on Sundays. That became my time to kind of meal prep. And I would drink late at night or on the weekends. So then I would start to go to bed earlier, so I wouldn't be tempted to drink. And I would tell myself, hold on. And those are things that I did early on, but absolutely, because you're already wired like this. And so what are you going to do with it going forward? And I think that 16 years later now, and I'm still sober, hallelujah, that I'm grounded enough, have enough perspective, and certainly enough experiences to share with others that I can use my previous experience for some good. And, I kind of found my way to fight back and up to the top. And I want to show people also why you want to do that and why it's worth it. Because my life now, I had a pretty good life before. It wasn't perfect, but I had a pretty good life before. And the bills got paid and I had a roof over my home and I was happy and had a life and friends. My life is 100 times better now. And I wouldn't have believed that at the time. I would not have believed it at the time. And I mean, here I am talking with you guys using this platform to do some good. So apparently I really needed to go through that.
Yeah, amazing.
And, I do want to go to the book, but I think another thing that's very powerful that you did before I even get to the book, Beth, is that you get back on KTSP. And I should tell you, I'm from Minnesota. So I probably seen you. I grew up in Minnesota, so I'm sure I probably saw you. And I can relate to the Minnesota walk.
Yes. Yes.
But when you were going back up, you rise back up to the top, you're back doing what you love, and then you have another trauma. That could have, and I want you to walk through that because one, you had the trauma of finding out you had a disease, a chronic condition. Then you had another trauma where you were covering the George Floyd riots and you were shot with a concrete bullet, luckily survived, thank God.
Yes.
But you had so many other things that happened out of that could have completely derailed you from your sobriety journey. But here you are 16 years sober. So I want to know, and you've written a book, and we're going to touch on that book. But how did you, in the midst of that, after achieving sobriety, but then still having other major traumatic things that could cause you to go back to a coping mechanism, how did you keep going in spite of those things?
I think it's a mindset. For me, it was a mindset. I acknowledged I had a problem. I owned it. I was, had made all of my amends. I got back into television news. And I remember thinking, just once I asked myself, is this a good idea for me to do? Because I know what I'm going to end up covering. I cover mass disasters. That's what I do. And so, I get into everybody's tragedy and emotions and turmoil. And I thought, is this wise for me to do? And I sat on that for a couple of days. And what I took away from that was, who better than me to tell their stories? I found this newfound empathy and compassion. And so knowing I was going back and going to do all of this, and you run hard. I like to run hard, and I don't like to get beat. And so that means I'm always going to be on the move. And so I had to put some things in order and in place for me to continue to be sober. So I got rid of all the alcohol out of my home, sold all of my barware, let everybody come over and take it. Everybody in my circle and my atmosphere knows I do not drink. And even for a long time, and when you're kind of known in the cities, these restaurants that I would go to or going out with friends or people, everybody knows I don't drink. And I'm very open about it. I know other people, try to keep it hidden. For me, the accountability has been everything, honestly. When I go to restaurants, and I'll tell you, 2 weeks ago, there was a mistake made at a restaurant I had gone into, then there was no seating at regular tables. And I was going to grab a quick bite and then go see a show. And so I sat at the bar and I ordered a club soda with cranberry and lime. And when it came to me and I took a sip and I was, I spit it out. And I said, whoa, did you put alcohol in that? And she goes, yes. The barback guy, said, this is what you ordered. I said, no, I ordered a virgin. And she goes, oh my God, Beth? And she looked at me and I go, yeah, I've been sober for 16 years, and she was horrified. I was horrified. And, that's just an instance of, if I'd seen her first, this wouldn't have been an issue. Everyone around me knows I don't drink, and people are really respectful of that. And they protect that as well. My friends, my inner circle, they protect that. And I protect it. It's just, I live by creative. Alcohol is just not an option for me because it actually does destroy my life.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. It's funny you said that because I was sober and still working in restaurants and bars, and everyone knew that. And here's a question for you. Because you celebrate your sobriety, some people would get upset because I've been talking about being sober for, 16 years. And people would get upset, and I'm like, wait. When I was snorting cocaine and drinking, you're the first person to call me up and say, oh, you were an asshole last night. But now I'm sober and you have a problem with it? Like, you have a problem because I'm telling people how great life is in sobriety? Did you come into like something that would trigger people? I have people now, 19, 20, I'm 20 years sober. They're like, do you know what you did back in 2001? I'm like, no, but tell me and I'll make the amends. And they're like, oh. I'm like, I don't know what I did 20-something years ago. It was probably pretty bad. I was in doing cocaine and drinking and acting like a fool. And then they're just like, oh, okay. Do you ever get that kickback that some people don't like that you're sober?
Yes. In fact, this has just happened recently. I got doxxed, a whole bunch of calls from various recovery centers. Once my word of my book started coming out, whole bunch of calls from recovery centers saying, oh, you filled out a form that you need to come in for treatment. And I'm like, what? How did you get? No, I did go to treatment 16 years ago. And they said, no, we just got this form a couple of days ago. And I'm like, oh, I dealt with this in TV news. I know what this is, right? It's like the anonymous emails, that sort of thing. And there were actually 6 recovery centers that called me in one day. So I thought, oh, somebody doesn't like that I'm out here talking about this. And I would never name drop. And it really doesn't involve them anyway. It's about me and the destruction that I caused. And then there have been a couple of emails that I've received recently too, like, you have some nerve driving. Well, I have my driver's license and I've had it back for 16 years. And, you know, I've done all of the requirements that I was asked to do to become a healthy person again. And then, you know, so there's that element of it. You have people who are anonymously, you know, poking at me. And that, if anything, that has the opposite effect on me, because I remember there was a woman in treatment, and she had been there many times, let me say that. And so we were talking, and I'm like, how is this time different for you? And she goes, oh, you'll be back. You'll drink again. And I remember, and it sounds catty at the moment, but I'm the personality that if you tell me that, you know, I'm going to do the opposite. And so I thanked her and I go, thank you. You have been so helpful in my sobriety journey. You don't even know. And she was shocked. You know, so there have been people who have, you know, tried to chip away a little bit at the armor, but I'm grateful that I'm today very solid in my sobriety. And I, you know, if I ever even am tempted or there's a weak moment, I have people that I reach out to that would be by my side in a New York second. And so, you know, I feel bad for those people that, you know, are poking at me, because why? I'm making myself a better person. It's better for society if, you know, someone's not out there drinking and driving. Oh, and someone, I got this email too. Beth, you didn't have a drinking problem. You had a drinking and driving problem. No. Beth had a drinking problem. You know, I don't need an excuse or a way out. I had a drinking problem.
That's
you know,
amazing.
and
Why am I drinking, driving, right? Like, huh?
Yeah, like, well, they don't see the connection. And I think that's because a lot of people don't necessarily understand addiction, you know, even though people are talking about their journeys. And that's one of the reasons why we do the show, to help people understand, but to also let other people know that they're not alone. And so I think you sharing your story is so powerful. And you're not only just sharing it on Addiction Talk. You told us about this. You've written a book.
Yes.
Called Stand By. I'm wondering, is this a play on something in news? Because I was like, stand by, you're live. That's the only thing that came to my mind when I thought about the title. But do I have it wrong?
Oh, no, you're right on, girl. No, you nailed it. And I thought you might get it. And I used to always jokingly say to people in the newsroom or interviews or whatever, you know, hey, stand by, I'll be right back, or stand by. And of course, stand by is a term and you hear it in our earpiece all the time. So stand by, get ready for what's next. Stand by, you're about to be hot, you know, whatever. So it just seemed natural for me to title it Stand By. And this book, it's the first of two books, but this book is about the fall. And people think they know the headlines, and they think they know what happened. Beth got a couple of DUIs. She got fired. You know, her life is awful. And where is she now? And people have asked me, well, what was it like? And I'm like, oh, well, you know, I take you right in there. So with the very first chapter, it's not a soft start. We start where I wake up in jail with women watching the TV news and my mugshot up there, and two anchors that I'm very good friends with talking about me. And I take you through the guts of it, because for me, I wanted people to know, okay, you hear about getting DUIs and it may sound like it sucks. Well, let me tell you how bad it sucks, and let me tell you why. And so I take you in from when I got booked and I'm walking into the jail, and one of the deputies goes, Beth, you're coming in the wrong door to pick up a mugshot. Because as media, we go pick up mugshots, right? And I said, no, I know. And he goes, are you the mugshot? And I'm like, and he came over and he whacked me upside the head like a father would whack a child, you know? And he goes, you know better. I'm not giving you any breaks. Go stand in front of the camera. You know, you're getting booked and fingerprinted and everything like everybody else. So I also wanted people to know, there was no preferential treatment anywhere in any of this. I was like every other alcoholic or addict on this earth. And here's what you go through. Here's what court is like. And the judge, of all people, the prosecutor was dead set that I go to prison, not just jail, but prison for 3 months, dead set. Because she wanted to make an example out of me. Of course, I was horrified and scared to death and all of that. And in my court hearing, my attorney says the judge wants to see you in his chambers. And he goes, I've never had that request in 30 years. And of course, I was like, this is not going to be good. This is not good. And when I went around the door to go into his chambers, there he was standing with his arms out. And he goes, come here, let me give you a hug. Today is my 20-year anniversary. So he had been sober for 20 years. And he goes, I saw your name the second it got on my docket. And he goes, I'm going to hear this case. And he goes, it's really unpleasant for you, isn't it? I'm like, yeah. And he said, I'm not going to send you to prison. And, I am going to punish you. Here's some things that are going to happen. But he said, you're already being proactive, taking care of some things, which shows me that you are motivated and ready. And I said, I'm so ready. Let's do this. I'm going to, like I approach my career and everything else in life, I go all in. So I'm ready. Let's do this. And the judge really, that moment, I would have never guessed someone can make an impact on me like he did. And he did. And I thought, I want to do this for somebody else that feels as crummy as I do right now. Come on. And here I was scared to death to let people know I had a problem and ask for help. And it turns out, because I thought I was strong and I could handle it, and you can control alcohol, but it controls you. And by letting people in, asking for help, it doesn't make you weak. It amplifies your strength and your chances of getting healthy again. And that judge just gave me that first little moment of mercy that I hadn't had in 6 months. And he gave me motivation. And I would like to do that for other people.
It's amazing.
No, and I think, Beth, when I look at that, first of all, I don't know, just that somebody would have that much compassion from his own journey just shows, one, you never know what other people are going through.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think that him just doing that, I could just feel that moment because I can visualize it as you're saying it, and just him doing that and how special that was for you and how you're giving back now through your book and through sharing your story, and how you're giving that virtual hug, to somebody out there who sees you. It's like, if she can do it, I can do it. And so as we wrap up the interview, I just want to know, where are you today? What are you doing? I know you're on the book tour and telling more people about the book, and we want to encourage people. It's called Stand By. It's available. It's raw. It's real. It's your story, but it has a little bit of a hug in there, as you said, just letting people know they're not alone.
It does have a hug in there. And I also take people through my life, leading up to all of this and the big explosion, as I call it, because I want people to know too, I had a fairly normal, good life, and alcohol doesn't discriminate, and once it's in your genes, so it doesn't matter, how you grow up. And I think no one wants to be an alcoholic or labeled one. I certainly didn't. And so you don't choose that, but you can choose your recovery every day. And so that's where I go in my head, that I wake up and I choose recovery every day. And so writing the book for me in the beginning I was writing it for me. I was venting, getting all my stuff out. And then as I started going on, and the judge, and I'm like, now I'm writing this for others to help show them why it's so important to find your spark again. And you can find your spark again. So I have a second book coming out that I'm still working on at this point, though. It's called Still Standing, because then it takes you from my doggy poop days, and I take you in there for all of it, and then through going to work at KSTP. And if you had ever told me that the second half of my career would be 10 times better than the first half, never in a million years would I guess that. And the second half was better. So I want to show people that, hey, you put in the work and the rewards do come, and your life gets better and better. And I don't have to wake up in the morning wondering who I owe an apology to, if they'll accept my apology. Did I slam into something, while I was drunk driving? None of that happens. So I live to make a long story longer, I live in St. George, Utah now. Because I moved here, and this is just my opinion, I feel like you can't heal in the same place you got hurt. And I needed a change of scenery. And the George Floyd riots and Lyme disease helped that happen. So it was 2019. Again, I covered disasters. And tell me if I'm going too long for you guys.
No, I'm listening. I'm enthralled in your story. Go ahead.
Jamie Kloss in Barron County, Wisconsin. Her parents were murdered in 2019, the fall and she was home. She was kidnapped, and she was duct taped and pulled through her parents' blood as the suspect put her in the back of the car. And then she was kidnapped and held captive for 88 days. Turns out the guy's a complete stranger, didn't know her. He saw her getting off a school bus. He obsessed over her. That was that. And then he, ruined a family's life and a community's life. It's a small town. And the Kloss family, everybody knows everybody there. They all work at the Jenny O turkey plant and and I cover mass disasters. So it's 2 hours away from the Twin Cities. So my bosses were like, hey, Beth, would you be willing to go live in a hotel essentially till this is over? We need you to stay on top of it, get close to the family, get close to investigators, get in there, be part of it, do what you do. And I'm like, absolutely. It's what I do. I jump on this. And the sheriff did something brilliant in the search for Jamie in the early days. He's like, hey, have a public search because we're in the woods of Wisconsin where there are farm fields, cornfields, it's hunting season. Get everybody out, come through this area. Everyone has to pass through a central location to give your driver's license. And so the sheriff could then run driver's license to see if there's any connection, to the Kloss family, or sometimes perpetrators will come back and take part in these searches. So we as media were invited to go out in the woods, trump through the woods with everybody else, with their cameras and And I, probably 24 searches in the woods. And I started to not feel well by January 2020. And I'm still living in Wisconsin, still covering this day in and day out. It's horrific. And her family, her surviving family, couldn't have been more wonderful. They were, they were people you wanted to help to get a conclusion to this. And I remember January 10th, 2020, I told the bosses, I'm really sick. And this is unusual for me because I run hard. I'm really sick. I'm not feeling well. You got to let me go to the doctor. I need a day off. Can you send some people to relieve me? And they said, yeah. So that morning I did go to the doctor, and she gave me a physical, and she's like, what's this on your back? And I'm like, I don't know. I live in a hotel, and my crew we aren't in each other's rooms. So I don't know. And it was misdiagnosed as a form of rosacea. So it turns out it was Lyme disease. So I went months and months and months, getting sicker and sicker and sicker and deathly ill and going doctors. And none of them had actually tested me for Lyme. And I went to a functional medicine doctor, with a big mountain of medical paperwork at this point, and I was almost bedridden. And I said, I think I'm dying. And he says, I think I know what you have, but let's do some tests. So we did. And they came back and he said, you are positive for Lyme disease. And I said, what do we do? How do we cure it? And he goes, it's too late to cure it. The first month, if you take an antibiotic, you can cure it. It kills the bacteria before it settles in your body. And he says, yours is now settled in your brain and your lungs. Well, that became very apparent because as time would go on and I do live shots and I talk on live TV for a living, I couldn't, like you and I talking, I'd be like, I couldn't get the words out. My brain just, there was a blank slate there. And so I went on a medical leave and did very aggressive treatment, which made me sicker, but they said that would happen. You get sicker before you get better. But he said, you're going to have this for the rest of your life. We might get you back where you're a functioning adult within 4 years. And when you hear that and you feel that crummy, because it's like having food poisoning, motion sickness, and the worst hangover of your life every day. And there's not a pill to take to get rid of your nausea, So sometimes I'd be getting ready for a live shot, like, hold on, blah, and then I came back after that medical leave. Because that's what we do. And I love my job so much. And 1 month later, after I came back from the medical leave, George Floyd happened. It was on my watch. Where it happened is a few blocks from our station. So we got there very quickly. We were there when he was still alive, when they were looking for the cashier who took the fake $20 bill. And so, we get there, it's in South Minneapolis, and it's just mayhem. And Minneapolis at this time had been going through probably a solid decade of some racial reckoning. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of animosity and tension towards the police department. And, so all of that takes place. The riots didn't start. They slowly, gradually started over the next 3 days after his death. And the third night, when they were breaking into the 3rd precinct to burn it down, and that's when you're seeing the Target looted and the liquor store and tens of thousands of people here. We were caught in the crowd surge. And I actually thought we might die, because I'm like, we may not get out of this. And I remember asking my photographer, shoot what you're comfortable with. And he said, Beth, if I was comfortable, I wouldn't be here. I'm like, ooh, I mean, it was, we put our tripods down, our lights down, everything. All we had were our cell phones and a camera, because I'm like, we can't have anything be used against us. So I'm watching everyone break into the liquor store, and I feel this searing pain in my left hip. And you kind of rub it because, you're in the middle of a riot and whatever. You ignore it, you keep going. I'm like, man, that really hurts. So I looked down and I lifted up my shirt and I'm like, I'm shot. And there was a concrete tennis ball sitting there because the protesters would soak them in there and try and use them against police. And so I got shot in my hip. And my photographer got hit in the back of the head with a 2x4. But it's, it's a war zone essentially, only it's in Minneapolis. So you keep covering it. Go back to work the next day because we were 12 on, 12 off. As a journalist, you know this, Joy. 12 on, 12 off, no vacations. Everything's canceled for the rest of the year. And I am still very ill from Lyme disease, but I'm getting up doing it every day. And I told my bosses, I will come in on the days that I can walk. And that's what it kind of became. And then, so that was May, June, July 20th. I was covering just your normal demonstration that was still going on at that time. And a protester had a gun, pointed it at my head and said, "Your media, you're next." And that was it for me. I snapped. I was in the hospital the next day. I kind of had a mental breakdown. And I told the bosses, I called them and I'm like, I don't know if I can come back. Like how many in the world of reading the tea leaves, I've been shot. I have Lyme disease. Now my life has been threatened. I'm high profile enough that it's a badge of honor if somebody takes me out. And the boss said, take more time, take care of yourself, and let's revisit this in a few months. And then just more journalists were injured over that time as well. And so when my next leave came up, I called him and I said, I can't do this anymore. After 30 years and listen, I've survived alcoholism. I've survived cancer, abuse. How many times can I have my life threatened? We had security at my home. And again, going back to, for me, I feel like I can't heal in the same place I got hurt. So I vacationed here in St. George, which is just beautiful. It's sunny all the time. It's a chill bubble. The national parks are here. And so I just pulled up stakes and moved here, called my realtor, said, sell the house in Minnesota. And I'm going to come here and try and heal. And this is a very big healing community. They have a big recovery community too. And that's what brought me here is, Beth 2.0, 3.0 at this stage.
Beth, wow.
I'm like a cat. I've had 21 lives and I'm still here. So I think something has to come out of that. And that's why I wrote the book. I have experiences and I'm grounded in perspective to share with some people and why you want to just live the life that you have.
Amazing.
I was just going to say, Beth, what a powerful story and all you've been through. And I can relate, just as a journalist, I covered health. So I have been at the Virginia Tech shootings and things like that, but never to the degree I can imagine just the trauma, that you've had. But to own that and still to take care of yourself and to say at the end of the day, nothing is more important to me than me now. And I'm going to move to Utah and I am going to rebuild and I'm going to keep living this beautiful, wonderful life that I have because it's a gift. And I feel like I've been given, like you said, like 20 lives in this journey. And in that, still having the grace and the courage and I don't know, just being a gift to others to give back. I think it's so powerful. And I just feel honored that you shared your story with us because it touched me. And I know that everyone who listens to this will be touched because you went through so much, but yet you kept getting back up.
Yes. And I went through it sober. Of course I worried like, gosh, somewhere along the way, is something going to break me? And I used to worry about that. What's going to break me. I can't let anything break me. So when I get stuck, I'll go to meetings or to deal with the PTSD. I'm a big believer in therapy. It can only help. And I've had EMDR, which was super helpful. I highly recommend that. And gosh, I just can't imagine going through all of that drunk. Like as a functioning alcoholic, maybe I wouldn't have made it out. Who knows? But I had my faculties and I still had my brain through all of this. And I just feel like when you go through all of this, there has to be something you share with others along the way out of it. There are always takeaways. And, here I am sitting here talking to you guys. This wouldn't have happened otherwise, right? And we can share the message to other people of like, look at the three of us. We've come out of this not just okay, but we came out of it better than before.
Yep.
So powerful. Well, Beth, I'm going to round up our interview unless Mike has any final questions, but I think you've given us so much and so much for our audience. And we just thank you for being our guest on Addiction Talk today.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I am so honored and I've enjoyed this immensely.